Hello, and welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, gun culture, the fundamentals of marksmanship, the right way, with God at the center, with a Judeo-Christian worldview and real-world first-hand experience. We'll roll into the bio. Before we do, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, in hopes that it will help other men find the podcast. First and foremost, I am a servant of God, a teacher, a preacher, a fisher of men. God is number one in my life, and everything that I do in this podcast is no different, and I don't apologize for that. A little bit about me in the background. I grew up, I guess what you would consider a heathen. Didn't grow up a Christian, but I grew up in the southeastern United States, what most would consider very poor. Hunting and fishing and shooting. Joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. After my combat tours in Iraq, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in law enforcement for several years in LAPD. I worked patrol assignments and more specialized assignments, where by God's grace, He got me through some nasty places in this world of war zones and some of the nastiest streets in the country. Not because I am better, because God chose to have mercy on me and had a purpose for me, and I'm thankful for that. After my time in law enforcement, I was a private contractor for federal government, for a three-letter government agency I won't specify, doing private contracting work. I'm very much involved in guns and gunfighting. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I should say my primary MOS is in both branches of the military or infantry, as of one sort or another. Specialized infantry in the Marine Corps and an MOS that no longer exists. I started competition shooting even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I won my first gold medal even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I've been blessed by God with the talents He's given me to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. I've won most of my competitions in rifle and pistol, but I've also competed in archery and shotgun and even muzzleloader, knife throwing, hatchet throwing. I've competed in all that. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide. Like I said, I grew up hunting and fishing and shooting. I've done it to put meat on the table because I like to put food on the table with the talents God's given me. I don't apologize for that. I've done it as a professional hunter and guide. I've slain all manner of beast and guided for all manner of beast. Bear and wolf and elk and deer, mule deer, whitetail deer. I've slain ram and fallow deer and countless animals. And I don't apologize for that either. FBI certified, firearms instructor, NRA, and a bunch of other three-letter government agency certifications. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Psalm 144. I've been blessed to be the commander of a tactical team, an SRT, special response team, in a large metropolitan area, where our primary job was to stop active shooters. But again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, called by God to share the good news, a teacher, a preacher, a fisher of men. With that, we will roll into the day's topic. So, this podcast is going to be on handgun hunting, which you would have gotten in the title. And this podcast episode came from a request from a patron. I've got a few requests from episodes from patrons, and some of those are waiting on some other things, so hopefully I can do a much better job. But I figured this one I could do because it was a question specifically for me and how I hunt with a handgun. So I figured I'd go ahead and tackle that. And I honestly don't know anybody else that really hunts with a handgun. But a shout out to patron with initials PB. I don't know that he wants me to use his name, so I won't. So I'll just say initials PB. So you heard a little bit about my bio, and you've heard that I've hunted most of my adult life, and I've been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country and slay all manner of beasts. And I've done quite a bit of hunting with a handgun. Taken quite a bit of small game and large game with a handgun. And I am not a do as I say, not as I do kind of person, but I will say that the kind of handgun hunting that I do should only be done with someone who has the skills to do it. When I was a professional hunter and guide, I would often tell somebody that I wouldn't be upset with somebody if they didn't take a shot. I would be upset with somebody if they took a shot they knew they couldn't make, or something to that effect, if they wounded an animal or missed an animal. I'd rather they just not take the shot. That's part of being an expert, part of being a good shooter, a good hunter, a good gunfighter, is knowing when not to shoot, knowing when to take that extra half second to get in a better position, to know when to pass on a shot because you just can't take it. We are called to have dominion over the animals. The first thing, the job that God gave Adam when he was in the garden, to look after it, to steward it, to have dominion over the beasts of the field. And I think part of that is being a good steward, and I don't take that lightly, and I don't want an animal to suffer. So I want to preface that in this episode before we get started. I also want to get started by saying that I shoot handgun and practice with handgun far more than any other weapon. But that's not because it's the better weapon. It's because it's not the best weapon. It's, if you told me I would have to get in a gunfight to preserve somebody else's life or other people's lives today or tomorrow, I wouldn't want a handgun. A handgun is a specialty tool. I would want a shotgun more than likely, and I would want a rifle after that, depending on the distance. But I don't carry those around day to day. I started my competition shooting with a rifle, but I transitioned over to mostly competing with a handgun. And the reason for that is if I get in a gunfight, it's most likely going to be with a handgun because that's what I have on me almost all the time. By almost all the time, I mean the vast, vast majority of the time. I couldn't put a mathematical number on it, but if I take a step out of the gate, there's a gun on me. From being at work to going to the gym, there's a gun somewhere in very close proximity. To going running, to all manner of things. And I love shooting a handgun. I love mastering a handgun, not because it's easy, because it's the hardest to master. And I hunt with a handgun because it's hard. That's one of the things I like about it. It is the hardest to master. So realize that going in for handgun hunting. You know, with a handgun, I may let 3 or 4 deer walk that I could have easily taken with a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 308. If your goal was to put meat on the table, I would never advise handgun hunting. It's not the best tool for the job. But I have taken many an animal, both large and small, with a handgun. I can't recall, honestly, if I tried to, I couldn't recall the number of deer that I've put down with a handgun. I guess I should also preface this with check your local laws. Some places it's not even legal. Some places there's restrictions on it. So do it where it's legal. But like I said, practicing with a handgun, because that's most likely what I'm going to have at the time. The same goes with hunting. I like to be outside. I like to be hiking in the wilderness, doing different things. A handgun is what I have ready most of the time. And if the opportunity presents itself and it's legal and ethical and moral, the handgun is what's going to get used. So that's enough, I think, caveats. So about hunting with a handgun. And different loads and different guns that I've used. I've taken many with a SIG 229 in 40 because that was my duty gun at the time and that's what I usually had on me. Taken deer with that. I've likely taken many deer with a Glock 21 45 because that was also a gun that I had for a large chunk of time. And I no doubt have taken many animals with a 9mm, and the gun that I've won the most competitions with and shot the most is a Smith & Wesson M&P, usually the pro model, and I've no doubt taken many animals with it. Like I said, I honestly can't remember. I have some pictures. A lot of that was pre-digital days, but I have quite a bit of pictures of me taking animals with handguns and different models, but I couldn't put a number on how many I've taken. When I was a law enforcement officer, a lot of times deer would get somewhere where they weren't supposed to be, and or they would get injured, and or just from natural causes they would get infected to a point where it wasn't ethical to just let them die a slow, horrible death. And I would often, I actually was required, it would call Fish and Game first, and I would. And in the jurisdiction where we were, I don't know that they ever had Fish and Game come out and dispatch an animal. They usually left it up to the law enforcement officers. Well, they're law enforcement officers too, but the police officers. And the vast majority of the police officers that I work with, because they grew up in more of a city setting or whatever it was, they had moral, ethical issues with it, they wouldn't shoot a deer. But I would. I got no qualms about it. Like I said, I don't apologize for it. I'll put meat on the table. I will dispatch an animal. I would much rather take it out quickly than watch it slowly suffer and wither away. So I took many, many deer like that in addition to hunting. Like I said, I couldn't put a number on it, but quite a few. So some loads that I would use, very commonly a 180 grain Federal HST in the 40 cal. In the 45, very common round, again, the Federal HST 230 grain, whether regular or plus P. And as far as 9mm loads go, the Federal 9BP and Federal 9BP LE, at the time when I was carrying that as my duty gun, that was probably the most likely load that I had in there. You can look those up. Not a very cool name, but they're a very good street-proven round, the 9BP and the 9BP LE. Taken quite a few animals with it, out of, like I said, the Smith & Wesson M&P and or Glock 26, which was my backup gun / off-duty gun / concealed carry gun. Still is one of my go-tos. I'm working on replacing it, but I haven't found anything better yet. I may have just found something better, but stay tuned on that. But anyway, that was the most likely load, the Federal 9BP or 9BP LE. I also really like, if you listen to the favorite 9mm loads for defense, I also, in the vast majority of recent years, go to the Spear Gold Dot 147s and the Spear Lawman 147s. Those are great rounds. And another gun that I have used quite a bit to dispatch is my Smith & Wesson 360 PD, which is a 357 Magnum, but I almost always carry with mostly 38 Special standard pressure. And the loads that I like for that are the Winchester Train and Defend. If you look those up, they're a good load for that. I believe they're 130 grain. That's often the gun that will be in my pocket if I had a long gun on me. And as I mentioned, I was a big game hunter and guide, and part of that was trapping. I would often use that gun to dispatch animals that were caught in a trap improperly, meaning they didn't die a quick death caught in the trap, and I had to dispatch them. That, Smith & Wesson 360 PD often took care of that. Now you'll notice that these are not, if you know anything about guns, these guns and these loads are not by any means what most people consider the best loads for hunting or the best guns for hunting, and I would agree. I don't carry those guns for hunting. I carry those guns to watch and be ready as a man to provide and protect. And if I can use those guns that I have on me to put meat on the table, I will. I don't know if you can hear the Rhodesian Ridgeback puppy I have playing, if that's distracting for you. But he's behaving, playing with his toys, so I'm going to let him be. But I'm about using and training with the gun that I'm going to have on me. Like I said, if the opportunity presents itself and it's legal and I can stop an animal from suffering and or put food on the table, I'll take that opportunity and I won't apologize for it. But the vast majority of my life, I'm not hunting. If I am hunting specifically to put meat on the table, unless I'm doing it for the challenge and I want a rifle or a shotgun, depending on the situation. But I said a lot of times I'm out hiking, a lot of times I'm out doing other things because I like being in the wilderness, reading my Bible, just being out in the wilderness. And if the opportunity presents itself, like I said, that's probably the gun that I'm going to get to the quickest. And if I know that as an expert with a pistol that I can make that shot, then I will. And the way that I generally hunt the vast majority of the time is I like to spot and stalk. If I can get behind said deer or said coyote or whatever animal, I will put the round behind the base of the skull, right where that hump is. If you look at the back of a deer's head, you can see the hump where the skull stops and the spine starts, right in that area. And I'm telling you, with a good center fire round, if you put the round there, that animal will flop down. But, I'm a blessed man. I've been blessed with a lot of talents, and I consider myself blessed with a lot of things. And I consider myself being blessed to be a master of the handgun. As I mentioned, I'm a state rifle and pistol champion a few times over. I've won more pistol competitions than I can remember. My general standard is 50-yard headshots, 12 in a row. And I'll generally, unless I'm really, really pressed for time and working on something else the vast majority of the time, I want those 12 consecutive headshots at 50 yards on what I call a steel head plate, about the size of a head, at 50 yards before I will do anything else. Because if I can't shoot good slow and master the fundamentals, I'm not going to shoot good fast. And if I'm shooting at an indoor range or a limited range where it's 25 yards, then I do about half size. It's about half the size of the head plate, and I do 12 in a row there. Sometimes can be very frustrating, but I'm just letting you know. And if you know you can, and nothing is for certain, there are strange things in ballistics. I'll concede that. But if you're certain you can sink that shot and get that in that general area, if you can look at the anatomy of that deer and you've butchered enough deer and shot enough deer to know that you can weave it in between the ribs or behind the rib cage at a quartering away shot, any of those rounds of good solid construction will do the job. Now, I am by no means saying that the 940, 45 are great hunting calibers, or the self-defense loads are great loads for hunting. They are by definition not made for that. What I'm saying is, of the two factors, ballistic performance and shot placement is by far more important. And if you want to start handgun hunting, I am not advising you to do that. Again, if you told me I was going to put meat on the table, I wouldn't do it with a handgun. If that was my goal, if I had to feed myself and my family, I would take the best tool for the job. But if I wanted it for the challenge, if I had taken many deer with a rifle and I wanted to start handgun hunting, and I wanted to do it the best way possible, I wouldn't recommend any of those gun or ammo combinations. I would recommend, probably, depending on your budget, a good, value place to start would be a Ruger GP100 and 357 Magnum, 4 to 6 inch barrel with 180 grain or 158 grain, not hollow point, but jacketed soft points. That's been a proven load for a long time, taking a lot of animals. I would recommend that. I would not recommend a load tailored for defense against humans. I would recommend a load and a caliber tailored for hunting. Or I would even say stepping up, if recoil in a handgun doesn't bother you, to a 44 Magnum and a full-frame revolver, or something like the Ruger Red Hawk or Ruger Super Red Hawk. Those are going to be much better for hunting than the guns that I normally will take animals with. Again, I have so much training generally with the handgun that I'm running at the time that, to me, that outweighs all those other things. But if you're asking suggestions for handgun hunting, those would be it. And again, ammunition tailor-made for that. 357 or 44 Magnum or some other similar caliber, 45 long Colt. And I would look at, if you're buying factory ammo, looking for loads made for that by like Buffalo Bore and Corbon are kind of known. I'm sure there are others, but those had a good reputation for a long time as good handgun hunting rounds. The ones made for that Again, jacketed soft points or hard cast lead. And don't forget the old standby of a good semi-wad cutter. If you don't know about semi-wad cutters, they were kind of the ballistic, I guess, advantage in the days before hollow points were common. And they're still a good round, and if I'm hunting, I will take penetration over expansion. And in general, those wad cutters, semi-wad cutters, truncated cone bullets will penetrate very deep, and they'll do more damage along the way than your traditional, just what you would consider a round nose bullet. So if you want to get started hunting deer or up size game, I would consider those considerations. The old Thompson Center Contender would also be a very good one if you wanted to do single shot work. If you're looking for something a little bit cheaper on a budget, if you get the Taurus revolvers, make sure you test them out. They do have some quality control issues from time to time. I think a lot of that has been fixed in recent years. Taurus has come a long way, but they made some called like the Hunter and the Raging Hunter, things like that. You can get a big bore revolver for a more affordable price. So you might want to check some of those out. Again, 357 44 mag. There are other good calibers like the 41 Magnum. They're just more obscure. But my suggestion is if you want to start handgun hunting, start with small game. If you live somewhere where you can hunt jackrabbits, generally jackrabbits have little or no regulation. Some places that I've lived, you can even hunt them without a license. And it's a good way to practice your handgun mastering. It's one thing to shoot on a square range. It's another thing to shoot a moving target. A breathing target. So rabbits are a good way to do that. Again, jackrabbits, if you live in the western states where they are, a lot of times they have little or no regulation. They carry a lot of diseases and have a lot of parasites. I'm not telling you to eat them. I'm telling you it's good practice and would make fine dog food. Also, things like prairie dogs, if they are where you live, or squirrel would be an easier barrier to entry if you want to get started in a handgun hunting and then move up. That would be my suggestion. And good things for that, if you're on a budget, the Heritage Rough Rider, or recently the Ruger came out with the Wrangler. Just old school looking single action revolvers in 22 long rifle and or 22 Magnum, and would be great choices for small game hunting. But really any 22 handgun will do if you'll make the shot well. And my go-to load for that is CCI mini mags, the hollow points generally. 36 grain hollow point in a CCI mini mag is a great game round. Actually, just recently took Pup on his first, what I would consider real hunt where we killed stuff and ate it. And I didn't take a pistol, I took a rifle 1022, again, because the goal was to put meat down. But it was very successful, and he got to have his first taste of wild game, and he loved it. But those CCI Mini Mag 36 grains are great, assuming that your 22 will eat them and shoot them. And then obviously your 9mm 40-45s will do fine on rabbits and small game like that. That will definitely kill them if you want to practice that way. And a good way to start practicing that is if you can find a little wash or a gully or a ditch or something, get those cheap clay targets you usually shoot with a shotgun that you throw up in the air, the clay pigeons, and either go with a buddy or go by yourself and go set those up in a wash, in a V of a tree. Obviously, your target, consider its background, in dirt embankments at varying distances, and walk down that ditch. And when you think you are close enough to actually make that shot, then make it and know the distances that you can ethically take game. It's a good way to practice hunting. And it's fun. A lot more fun than just shooting at a square range target sometimes. So those are some suggestions and some thoughts from me on handguns and handgun hunting. I'll try and put a picture of a deer that I've taken with a handgun as the backdrop. But for some reason on some of the platforms, and I don't know what platform you listen to this on, by God's grace, this podcast is on quite a few platforms. iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and a bunch of others. Sometimes it just shows the one picture for the podcast, and sometimes it shows individual pictures for the individual episode. So you can try and look that up. Or go to goodshepherdtraining.com. You'll probably see a picture on there. goodshepherdtraining.com. That's your one-stop shop for this podcast and the Alpha Male podcast. And if you care about the important stuff, Simple Man Sermons, the preachings of a simple man called by God to share the good news of Jesus Christ. So go there and check that out. If you want to support, like, subscribe, leave a review of the podcast. If you want to support financially, because these are free to listen to, and that's great, but they're not free to produce and put out. You have to pay for things like a website, things like a podcast host. We use Spreaker for these podcasts. Those things aren't free. So if you want to help support the tribe you're a part of, support this podcast and the message, consider going to Patreon. And for the fraction of the cost of a box of ammo, you can support the podcast. And for all those that do support, I am humbled, very humbled that anybody listens. If you are going to get out there and hunt, and I encourage everybody to know how to put meat on the table in a variety of ways. Do it ethically. Be a good steward of the resources God's put you in dominion over, the beasts of the fields and the birds of the air. Be a good steward of those things. Get out there, get it done. Here's a tactical tip as a thanks for staying tuned to the end of the podcast. This goes for any kind of hunting of large game, or I guess small game for that matter. But make your first shot a good shot. And if you don't think it's a good shot, then don't take it. We already covered that. And then, unless that animal just immediately drops to the ground and doesn't get up, if it even attempts to start to get up, if you can get another round in it, get another round in it. I, by God's grace, have never... Shooting prairie dogs is a different thing or something like that, because you're just there to eradicate them, to help out the farmers or ranchers or whatever. But I'm talking a big game animal that's not considered a varmint. By God's grace, I've never decided to take like a deer or similar animal and not put it in the dirt and recovered it. Been able to go up to it and find it. You think if you put a round in that animal, even if you are almost certain, and you can never be 100% certain, like I said, there's a gray area in ballistics. But if that animal even attempts to get up or doesn't go down right away, if you can get another round in it, get another round in it. Again, I don't apologize for, slaying all manner of beasts and putting meat on the table, but do it ethically. Be a good steward and don't let that animal suffer more than it has to. With that, I'm going to say thanks for listening and have a blessed day.